Welcome to the Heart of Soul podcast, an exploration of who you are, what you are, and why you are, offering new ways to investigate age-old questions at the heart of you. Hi, it's Joseph, and thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. In today's episode, we explore the metaphysics of money, beginning with the fantastical question of whether Jesus owned his own clothes and why that question was of international significance about 1700 years ago. Has it been answered? Well, keep listening to find out. The subject of money leads us to explore many different topics, from the gold standard to competence and caring as the basis for healthy work, the difference between money seeking and meaning seeking. It really is a deep part of the experience of being human. Also, on October 8th, 2022, there'll be a Clubhouse event with Bree Barron, that's Stace's wife, along with Gertrude Wunschmann and Eric Grace. You can find info on all that by going to the Clubhouse app and searching for Holy Human Club. That's WHOLLY, Holy Human, to find Eric Grace, or you can search by his name. For the there's an October 23rd event that I spoke about last time. That is going to be another open door day. We did one already on Clubhouse, and I think it went very well. That one's going to be on Zoom. You can reach out to Eric about that. Or if you want to email me just to say hello and tell me how much you absolutely love the podcast, you can email me at joseph, Josef, at clearandopen.com, and I'll connect you with Eric. I'd love to hear from you. And if there are any questions, anything you want us to talk about, we're open to that as well. I remind you, as always, to please listen to this podcast from the beginning and in order. Thanks so much for listening. Well, welcome forward, listeners, to another exciting, dazzling, and metaphysically thought-provoking episode of... My goal is just to make Stace laugh and as quickly as possible in the beginning. I was not conscious until this moment. Then I was like, as soon as you laughed, I felt I got it. It's the entertainer in me.
This is an asset, not a liability in you, sir. So,
well, but it's also been a liability at times in my life. So
yes.
There have been times where I have forced myself to not be funny for weeks at a time in order to experience what it might have been covering up.
Okay.
Which is a rabbit hole we may go down one day. But on our agenda today is money. One of the, what do you call them? The estates of the human?
Yes.
One of the, How many estates are there?
I think the last count we had was 7, but I have to look it up.
Yeah.
I have to remind myself of some of the, there's so much to identity.
Yeah.
And people, I guess, I haven't expressed it this way in the podcast maybe, but I'm a devotee of identity. Mm-hmm. I'm its author, but however much of it sourced in me or sourced in spirit is another interesting conversation.
Yeah,
it wasn't channeled. I can tell you I had some contribution to it, seminal contribution, but it's interesting that I could say on a local lifetime level, I'm a devotee of identity, and in the bigger picture, I'm a devotee of the Christa. So that's another interesting structure of God thing that we might put identity's version of the structure of divine being into a little more finer focus for a near future podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and there's a whole other little rabbit hole right there that might be worth talking about, because it's I know in my own role as a teacher in the venues I teach, it's so easy for people to get the incorrect idea that just because you can talk about it really articulately means you're like totally embodying it. It's the best possible response, and then laughter, right? But it really is. It's because, and the audience contribution to that certainly was in 1.0 EBE land, Identity 1.0. My projection with you that I still have to catch myself in is the desire on the student side for the teacher to be perfect.
Uh-huh.
And well, of course, everything they're telling me, they perfectly embody. And then when they find out it's not true, there's this pushback of like, oh, you didn't, but when it was never stated like, oh, I get all of this, but there's this implicit desire we have for someone on this freaking planet to have everything figured out.
Projection of perfect parents that we
Yeah.
never got. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say explicitly, if it's not already explicit enough, just because Stace and I can articulately talk about this doesn't mean that we're not, as you say, both devotees and working on this stuff every day.
Every single day.
Every single day. And sometimes more often than that, it seems. So with that
I'd like to give a shout out, excuse me, Joseph,
please.
just to Bree on that, because she was the one that really fought for the difference between understanding the paradigm and embodying the paradigm, especially when it came to myself and my own shadow. And so, yeah.
And it's also inevitable, I think, between women and men, because yin is so whole and uncompartmentalized.
Yes.
A woman is less able to do, which is a good thing, essentially,
Yes.
what we're doing all the time, which is talking not as if we perfectly embody it, but to be able to compartmentalize. You and I can talk about it far better than we can embody it. And that's critical to be able to teach it. But you also need the counterpoint of like, yeah, but how well do you really embody that? Both have to be true.
Sure. Yeah, and also on the inside, because of that purity of wholeness, it actually is just as hard for yin to embody, because they come from a non-segmented, another way to say compartmentalization, a non-segmented wholeness relative to yang, and that disallows quick segmentation and processing. It slows down processing, sort of like a glacier. When a glacier moves, you never see a glacier move, but then you plot it over a year or two and you see how much it's moved. It's maddening for Bree. I'll speak for Bree here, for how slow the wholeness of the yin, because it can't segment in some ways and embody meta. It gets meta, yin, just as much as yang, but it's just as hard, if not harder, to embody meta, because they are what they are, whereas yang is more, we are what we believe we are. You see? And
I get the image of like a rubber band. Yang can sort of leap ahead mentally or metally, and then catch up to itself, and yin doesn't do that.
No, and that's a really critical meta structural truth that really affects how both men who are, in an ideal sense, 2/3 yang, 1/3 yin, and women who are 2/3 yin, 1/3 yang, how differently they process reality, and at what velocity. So men look like they're always ahead of women, but it's a total illusion.
Yeah, and there's the patriarchy right there. It's like, well, we understand and can talk about this, and you can't follow that, so therefore we must be better.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, God. And while we're on meta, well, just something you said there at the beginning intro, the metaphysical basis of money, or some reference to that. I'd always like to remind audiences occasionally that metaphysics doesn't mean spiritual dynamics.
Yes.
Metaphysical means the orienting assumptions governing the paradigmatic worldview that you are striving to live within and represent. So metaphysics is a philosophical term, and it's been hijacked by New Age spirituality into, I'm into metaphysics, and I guess they mean by that worlds beyond this world, metaphysics, which is not an incorrect use of the word, but not how we mean it. So.
Yeah, I remember, I think a long time ago, you said you can't have a metaphysical experience, which is something, that's how people use it to mean a beyond dualistic experience, and that's the way the New Age paradigm uses it, but that's not the way we use it. And it's part of the death of critical thinking, because metaphysics is a part of critical thinking.
Yes.
And so it's become, having a woo-woo out there experience type thing rather than really rigorous philosophical discourse.
Exactly. Rigorous philosophical integrity also. So,
Incoherence, yeah. Mm-hmm.
you betcha.
Yeah. So we're going to
Okay.
apply that to money, which is, it's
Well, let's do that.
yeah.
Let's do that. I guess there's not too many topics beside money and sex that have as direct a contact of the spiritual rubber to the human road as sex and money. But in identity, because it doesn't see anything humanly as inherently non-spiritual, it has deep and abiding metaphysical positions and offerings about money and sex. But it turns out I chuckle a lot at how similar money and sex are in many ways in terms of how to orient, in the fact that neither of them are the most important thing in life, but they're not the least important things in human life either.
Mm-hmm.
So with that caveat, let's dive in.
And I
Uh,
want to also say, I feel like money is often where some of the most distortions are because it's something we deal with every day. And the
yeah.
familiarity creates a false sense of sort of security around it. Like, oh, I earn and spend money every day. I must have some, undistorted view of it when usually that's anything but true.
Truly. What that's actually a part of how this will unfold today, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you asterisked that particular dimension of it. So I like to start out discussions with money in a quasi spiritual context, and that is um, a little before the Council of Nicaea, way back when
323 AD,
something like that, and
325.
3 something.
Mm-hmm.
When they were struggling to codify this brand new official religion of the Holy Roman Empire, called Christianity. They had all sorts of writings and quote unquote testaments, gospels, to have to figure out which one fits in best for the new religion they want to strategically make Constantine and Fausta solid in their positions as emperor and empress of the
Mm-hmm.
Holy Roman Empire's picture. But anyway, at one point, and this is a beautiful example of the silliness of religion, of standard religion anyway, is that they convened a very important meeting to decide, vote on whether or not Jesus owned his clothes. Now, this was a hugely metaphysical challenge point, because if they decided that Jesus did own his clothes, well, then maybe tomorrow, maybe he owned his shekels. And after owning his clothes and shekels, maybe he can own land, and that all leads to the worst possible outcome, and that is, might he own his body? Well, that one would be completely in very dangerous territory.
Because then he's a person with an individual set of motives and intentions, and it starts to erode the idea that he's the son of God and the son of
Exactly.
God and all that, right?
Exactly. Especially the aspect that says he was born spermlessly. Uh,
Right.
this was really a big issue, and I actually marvel and respect that the intellectuality of these electors, as it were, trying to represent and codify Christianity, that they realized this was an important point that they'd better have some damn dogma about, because they're going to be challenged about that with over time. So, of course, they decided that he did not own his clothes. And so there was a collective sigh of relief that they would never have to worry about having to decide if he owns his body. But this
Collectivistic sigh of relief.
absolutely, Joseph. So this is, we can smile and chuckle about this, but this is deadly serious stuff for
Mm-hmm.
Christianity,
Yeah.
because without the spermless birth, immaculate deception, uh, kind of thing, Christianity collapses. Those are two mainstays: the Immaculate Conception of Mother Mary, no original sin. The one Immaculate Conception has nothing to do with Jesus' spermless birth. A lot of people don't know that
Oh,
in
I didn't know
Catholic
that.
theology. Yeah, the Immaculate Conception is Mother Mary was the only human being they voted on that was conceived without original sin. That's the Immaculate
Oh, I
Conception.
didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, couldn't have a regular mother with original sin birthing the Son of God. You see, so they had to retrofit Immaculate Conception. That's not the same as spermless birth. So that's why Identity would like to clarify the historicity of these things.
But wait, how if how did they make that work? How does that she had no original sin? Everybody had that, and everybody
Yeah,
will have that. So how does she
but
exempt?
they had to retrofit that reality to be the mother of the Son of God. It was completely strategic.
So it was just like she was somehow
Yes,
exempt
somehow,
through the magic
somehow.
of stuff. Okay.
Yes,
There was
yeah.
no metaphysical argument for how that happened.
No, this is classic example of magical thinking, not critical thinking.
Hmm.
So this was the case. So the collective sigh of relief. Okay, he doesn't own his clothes. Then we never have to worry about whether he owned his body or not. How could the Son of God be so limited by owning a human body? See, which is of course sets up why he can arise into the sky at the ascension
Yeah.
after he resurrected from the dead, which is another, of course, fiction of to fortify the solidity of Christianity. So, going forward, that with money, money is intrinsically related to that silly, important question whether he owned his clothes. Did he have to buy his clothes? You know, what was his What was Jesus's relationship to shekels and life?
Hmm.
Another interesting topic, but to stay on track for today, the best thing to start with in that context is that the whole human race addresses the issue of money from lack. It's always, and not always, not actually seldomly appreciated that here is where the identity's offering that no child has ever received the adequate emotional food necessary to become an authentic person without needing a shadow protector to step in and take care of human business. In other words, uh, because of that, we all start from an inauthentic or a lack of authentic being. And therefore, we're always going to be coming in all domains of life, including money, where it really shows up in Dayglow Orange, from a point of lack. Because we're looking at money, it's in a sense unconsciously identity would offer that it's in the context of childhood wounding, money is a substitute for the emotive safety, security, and well-being that was never provided in childhood. So much of our toxic relatednesses with money are grounded in lack, as where money is unconsciously related to as a substitute for well-being, security, and safety. And that's how we nounify money. We make it a thing that will provide us with safety, security, and well-being. So coming from lack means we're going to always have a shadow relationship with money until we get more in the center of our own authentic being.
As you once said, one of my favorite Stace quotes, you can never get enough of what doesn't really nourish you. So if you
Yes.
identify money as something other than what it is, and you're looking for it
Yeah.
to fill a hole from childhood, then you can never get enough, or you're going to come from there is never enough.
Yeah. When we talk about Bezos, uh, the Zuck from
The
outer
Zuck.
space, or Gates, these folks, no matter how much charity giving they do, which is mostly optics in the way that I read out most of them, uh, is that it's never enough. And if it was enough, Jeff would have uh, um, completely cut in by 80% all the fees that his corporation takes in.
Hmm.
Google wise and all this. So it wouldn't need the kind of $1 billion status or multi-billion dollar share values if it was enough.
Right.
So, in fact, in this domain, have you read recently how what was the clothing company that he just changed?
Patagonia.
Patagonia. He had enough money. This guy, what a great guy. He has enough money, so now he wants to the company is now owned by the need that the world has of certain funding
Mm-hmm.
requirements. So he set it up this way to shift his wealth into that really interesting corporate structure.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, this lack of coming to money from a point of lack means that before we get any further in, identity, again, as part of its metaphysical foundation, must define terms before we start banding them about in our paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the definition, which we're going to parse into three phrases here. The first part, well, I'll read the whole thing first, then we'll go with the parsing. Money for identity is it's an energetic symbol for peacefully exchanging how to say it, goods and services, value for value, in a context of expressing one's passion path in life in mutual benefit and goodwill with others. Now that's loaded. That's a loaded one. So we're going to take each prepositional phrase here apart. Money is an energetic symbol for peacefully exchanging goods and services. Now, what is it? It's a symbol, and that means we have to talk about how the hard currency that you hold in your hand is not money.
Mm.
Money is an idea. It's an idea to take the place of hauling around bushels of wheat or anything else we want to barter with each other, where some of us are full in one domain of goods and services and others are not so full. So we use money as a shorthand and not have to lug around all these physical bartering matter-based things. So we invent an idea called money, and this has been in the human consciousness for a long time. But the issue here is that very few people realize that money is not the hard currency. That's once removed from the incredible idea of money, which is beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
elegant, an amazing one of the things that allowed civilization to finally get off out of the jungles and the forests.
I remember
So
once when you were teaching about this, I remember vividly, it was in a money seminar like 10 years ago. You said it begins with related to this mutual goodwill thing. I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. And then you said, okay, but I don't have time to scratch your back right now. So here's this symbol of value that is
yes.
good for one back scratching at some, or other goods and services at some other future point in time.
Yes, we could go off on that a body-based scratching as a metaphor for a lot of other body-based activities in which monetary values are assessed and expressed.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So, yeah. So in that sense, if we go one step further, the digital ones and zeros on your bank account online is not money either. That's twice removed from the essence of money, which is this golden, beautiful idea of that allowed us to really focus on our survival and thrival in ways that were mutually beneficial for each other as the ideal. And as we know in the modern day, that ideal is become unraveled so badly. You have the 1% and the 99%, and it's getting worse every year, which
Yeah.
we'll address here maybe a little later.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, when you look at money as the hard currency that you hold in your hand, you're making a noun of it.
Mm.
But the idea of money is actually, I would offer, better suited to be referred to as a verb, because it's constantly in motion relative to the dynamics of needs and wants and exchanges between human beings. So as soon as we nounify it, oh, it's this gold or silver or green paper or colored paper that we exchange every day, we nounify it. And what happens then, identity offers, is that we create a relationship with it instead of creating a relationship to it. This seems like a small prepositional shift, but it has a mountain of acreage difference to it. As soon as you make it a noun and you have a relationship with money, you're basically mating with it. Uh, uh, and if it's coming from lack, just like in relationship, it's codependent. We create a
Hmm.
codependent relationship only with nouns in most cases, not all. So once you have a relationship with money because you identify it as that stuff you hold in your hand or digitally represent on your screen, um, you are already, because we're all coming from lack. We always want more. It's never enough. If we get out of renting all our lives and to buy a house, okay, then that house isn't big enough anymore, or our self-image says we need a spa in it, or we need a library in it, or whatever, and we're off to the races.
Hmm.
So what we've got here is when you come from lack, whether it's relationship with money or relationship with anything else, you're coming from a hole in us somewhere, an inauthentic hole, and we're going to over attach to that which comes from lack. And this is not this should be so taught, but even starting in eighth grade, about what money is and what money isn't, and the ramifications of coming from lack toward it.
Instead,
So
we learned that, well, we're not taught anything about money, but related to codependence and overattachment, we're taught that sex is not worth the risk and that abstinence is the best strategy. That's what I remember from
or
eighth grade.
oh yeah, when Nancy was saying, just say no,
Oh, same with drugs, right? Just,
yeah,
yeah.
same with drugs. It's all
Hmm.
the same. So exactly right. But that clarity really, I'm going to say it just one more time because to let that soak in for a moment, that anytime we come from lack, which is a hole in us, a hole in our authentic, soulful human being, what we're going to connect to or relate to with money, with another person, with our career, whatever it is, as soon as we nounify something coming from lack, we're going to be um, projecting loss, the opposite of loss. You're going to projecting gain in it, that I have to have a lot of it in order to feel safe, secure, and full of well-being.
So when you say relating with as opposed to, inside with is sort of an entanglement. That's what you mean
Yes,
by the preposition with, as opposed to, whereas like you're over here complete and
yes,
whole, and that's over
yes.
there, and I can relate to it, not entangled up with it.
Exactly right, Joseph. Uh, uh, Relating to money is the only way to ever have a clean relationship with it that doesn't project too much or too little into it. Because identity would always ask us to look at both sides of the scale. That poverty and riches are not opposites. They're simply ends of the same rainbow. And a lot of people get off as much on poverty, consciously or unconsciously, as they do on riches. Not quite as many, but
Yeah.
people's spiritual privation has been a dynamical bandwidth of human endeavor for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And in that sense, poverty is a positive quality, and that's just as much of a problem, a poverty mindset or heart set, as it is a riches heart set.
It's
So it's
easier
not.
for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter heaven. That,
Yes,
yeah.
that's been used to support privation
Hmm.
as an asset or an instead of a liability. But that's what that inherently disconnects our humanness to our spirituality. And it's
Right.
exactly this domain that identity was born to finally show that it is a seamless, there's nothing intrinsic to separating our humanity from our spirituality, starting with original sin, which was a complete fiction to control the masses.
And of course, we have money as the root of all evil to add
Uh,
into that as well.
Sure. And exactly my next point, you read my mind there, Mr. Producer. Uh, and that is that it's not, identity would offer, it's not the love of money that's the cause of all evil. It's the will for money that
Ah.
causes all the evil in the world. When we create a with relationship to money, project our shadows and insufficiencies into it, and then want well-being and security and safety from on the other side, we're using our will, and not love. Another way to say this is
Because it's coming from lack, and you can't come from love if there's a hole that you're filling. Yeah.
exactly right. And to peel that onion one more layer, when you say Jeff or Bill or the Zuck love money, really it's not. That's a misnomer, a metaphysical slur blur, where it's not that we love money. We love what money gives us,
Yeah.
not money itself. And this is another important thing that slips by even really intelligent people every single day, especially those working in the stock market.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Where
or
money where money is more a noun than anywhere else, right?
right. And then the worst version of that is arbitrage, which is trying to figure out the floating value of money to your that when it floats just in the right way to take advantage of it, to make money off the value of money, which is just so far removed.
And then you've got crypto, which is one more layer somehow
Oh,
impossibly removed from even that. It's a made up
exactly.
currency that's more made up than the first made up one that we're now going to trade.
Exactly. It's when it becomes a commodity of floating value. This is why identity was sad that Nixon took way back in the day took money off the relative value of gold. This was whether or not people know this, the history of this or not, but this was a scheme put together by the Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with the federal
And it's
government
not a
at all.
reserve either. It's neither
No,
federal nor reserve.
no, this was a thing where it was leveraged, where they convinced Tricky Dick that if they divorced the value of a dollar to a certain amount of gold, they could float, and just like we were saying, float currency free of gold bedrock kind of relationship. And then whatever they decided, this cadre of people called the Federal Reserve, whatever benefited them the most, not the common good, whatever benefited them the most would be the value of money. So returning to the gold standard is certainly not a panacea. It won't solve everything. But because money itself is an idea, having some reality referent to the value of gold, just some, will minimize the kind of corruption that is possible in manipulation of the value of money, which happens every day of the week and
Yeah.
twice on
It
Sunday.
might stop. It might stop things like printing. What was the pandemic was $6 trillion or something, and recently
Yeah.
the pushing through of the paying off the student loans by the government, which was
Right.
fascinatingly. Here's another metaphysics thing. This happened just the last couple of weeks. So that got pushed through based on some emergency clause related to the pandemic. But in the same month or the same week, perhaps Biden said the pandemic is over,
Yes.
which is a total and complete contradiction.
Well, yeah, and Uncle Joe's his heart might be in the right place, but wait, if the pandemic's over, why are there still vaccination mandates for people coming into the country? Wait, what? Democrats are not really good at their forte is more heartful idealism, where the Grand Old Party, which is now, of course, the gang of pedagogues, GOP.
That's you're going to say grandiose.
The Democrats, are the idealists, and historically Republicans are the realists, and that's why, in one way, there is a basis for our two-party system, but because an Edenist is socially progressive but financially conservative, we're neither Democrats nor Republicans by imprint. And a lovely third party would be lovely one day if it was a viable thing that didn't take away too much from the current system and its checks and balances.
Yeah.
But the elephant's realism and the donkey's idealism is actually a pretty interesting and beautiful thing, even though those labels have switched over my lifetime. In the past, the Democrats were the friends of of business, and the Republicans were the friends of the common person. And
That's
now,
right. Yeah. I never thought
remember
about
that
that.
early when
Yeah.
you were growing up, the Southern Dixie Democrats, these guys, give me a break. It was all about them and their needs and business. But then now in the modern day, it's sort of, for a while there, it went back the other way where the Republicans now, of course, the last 20 years, have really been in the pocket of business, NRA and included. And the Democrats more fighting for the rights of the small guy, the small people, the lesser well known or the lesser well off. So, but now you've got to mix.
Now they're all in
Well,
the pocket of business
well,
with just
well,
different
yeah,
presentations about it. Yeah.
exactly. All they do now is juggle the balls of optics
Well, I
in
guess the
any one.
Democrats got tired of watching the Republican people in office laugh all the way to the bank. They wanted some
Yes.
of that too.
Right. Yes, they want it, but they can't show what's behind the curtain. Whereas the
Mm,
Republicans were proud to show what was right in front of the curtain,
yeah.
and still do in that way. So, in this way, we begin our relationship to money on a whole other track in identity, and that is the only way to begin that journey to clean up our relationship to money is become our authentic version of self that was lost in childhood, which is far deeper far deeper depth of consciousness exploration than standard therapy, standard psychology, and even standard philosophy. So that's a deep dive into embodying our most authentic being, which for most of us, well, I started on that journey a little even before my event in the late 80s. So that's going on 40 years, 35 to 40 years, and I'm still chipping away at the protection and the shadow. So there's a big difference between being 70% driven by unconscious shadow dynamics and 30% by authentic versions, which is identity's offering. That's never enough in childhood. It can't cover our soulful authenticity 100% ever. The soul is too strong. But the difference between 70-30 shadow authenticity and 50-50 is enough to drive a paradigm through.
Hmm.
And so every little 1% gets added from one side of the equation of shadow-based domain of human life to authentic changes the foundation and keeps rechanging the foundations for our embodiment as authentic human beings. So, in that sense, there's no way to not have a codependent relationship, a nounification of money to provide something we never were provided in childhood unconsciously. So, in that sense, that's sort of our first phrase. We've kind of parsed that one down to the bone.
Money as an energetic symbol.
Yes, for
Mm-hmm.
peacefully exchanging goods and services, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Next one, though, becomes a really interesting topic: value for equal value. That's the
Mm-hmm.
middle phrase here. Now, there's where we come in to the whole idea of how competency relates to the domain of money, a very seldomly examined, a philosophically examined relationship between competency and money. But again, identity looks in with different sets of eyes and sees through the natural discourse of our philosophical social world and looks a little deeper. And in that sense, let's define identity's definition of competency. It's the it's the best way to say it is it's sufficiency of expertise in caring service to self and others. That's how we would define it. Competency, I'll say it again, is sufficiency of expertise in caring service to ourselves and to others. In other words, I can't take money for anything, for example, unless I deem myself competent enough to deserve it. Well, here's here comes in at this moment in our analysis the worst sequela, Joseph, of having a codependent relationship with money based in lack, and that is that how many people, just spitballing here, how many people want the most money for the least effort?
Well, that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what you're supposed to do, is
it's
maximize the return on your investment of time, of energy.
it that metaphysical position is so normalized, is so toxic and yet normalized into our world that it has driven the entire money madness dynamic of our species in relationship with money. Uh, it is a given that everyone should want, and it's completely reasonable to want the most money for the least amount of effort. Now, if you want the most money for the least amount of effort, you are not only selling out an integrous definition or an integrous relationship with money, you are selling out yourself. Because what, as we'll get to here shortly, in Identity's picture, money must be tied to a combination of passion, a passion path of your life, and your skill set. Did you hear what Mark Cuban, is that how you pronounce his last name? The billionaire guy, Shark Tank,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
yeah, Cuban, I think. Um, he recently came out with a white paper, but this came out of his mouth when didn't have a cigar in it, I guess, uh, where he said it's a ridiculous thing to connect passion path with money. He said this past week that what you should connect to money is effort, not passion, not your passion path. If you link your passion path to it, it's going to cause all sorts of problems. It's not controllable. If you want to maximize your return on your relationship with money, you need to link it to your effort, and that sideways brings in skill sets. And
Mm-hmm.
so another way, if you denude that effort thing, at the base of it is base it on your skill sets, which may not what you like to do, but
Yeah.
here's your skill set, right?
I,
So
ha- I have a real world example here. I just met with a client this morning who is the stepfather of a 19-year-old kid who it appears may be wanting to move back home. And the kid has a lot of entitlement and has been pursuing jobs where he could that are relatively easy for him, but riskier, and has gone through a bunch of less paying jobs that are less interesting to him, and hasn't been able to make ends meet, and is $3,000 or so in debt with his parents, but doesn't want to do jobs that are beneath him at age 19. And
oh,
yeah,
wow, yeah, that goes right to the heart of what we're talking about. Um, if you're well, let's reference in the meta this way. The identity offers that human life is about three intrinsic bandwidths of consciousness: beauty, bounty, and meaning. Right? Whether we're an overt aesthete or a closet aesthete, we all admire beauty, whether that beauty is what's coming out the rear end of a car in a NASCAR race, I guess, is beautiful to NASCAR race. But beauty, however you catalog it, is a part of life that we're all striving. We're attracted to what we find beautiful. Bounty is, in Identity's point of view, sufficiency of our relationship to money, such that our basic needs and wants are met from a survival place first and a thrival place second.
mm-hmm.
First survival, and this applies to what you just said. My reason I went open this door is that over the years I've had Bree still. I'll mention, oh, I did that for 4 weeks, or I did that for 3 months. And how many bloody jobs have you had? I had to finance my dedication to this thing that was in me that had to come out, that wound up being identity, in all sorts of jobs that would not fit at all what you'd imagine someone who authored a brand new paradigm the human condition would do: cleaning houses, cleaning toilets, mowing lawns, working for planning companies that planned out construction projects over time. When does this have to be ordered to be on the ground at this moment to match the plan when they have to pour this concrete? Blah blah blah. I worked in an eyeglass shop.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, back in the Midwest, and so dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs. So there was nothing ever beneath me, even though I didn't like cleaning toilets and I didn't like cleaning offices. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. You do whatever is necessary to provide for yourself self-responsibly. So if you're enabled by a wealthy parent, and you get to say, well, it's beneath me this way, again, you're not coming from an authentic, integrous being. You're coming from your wound and your shadows. Back to the making the most money, getting the most money for the least effort. So this is part and parcel of our proof of and how normalized that has become in our world to be default. And this is exactly why our relationship with money is to money is so messed up. It's messed up because it's withized. So back to competency here to complete this. For identity, competency and caring are indivisible. You're competent because you care for yourself and others, and you're caring enough to want to be competent in whatever goods and services you're exchanging. So in that sense, identity has a little mantra, a little funny mantra. It goes something like this: if you care and you're competent, congratulations for being minimally human. If you care and you're not competent, get more training, or in integrity, resign, whatever position is paying you, right? If you don't care, but you're competent, well, you're insufferably arrogant. I'm out of here. If you don't care and you're not competent, get out of the way and get help fast for the existential disease your consciousness is suffering from in your so-called life, because you're wasting this incarnational opportunity. So caring and competency are so indivisible in an integrous being that you can't take money or earn money for something that you yourself don't feel competent in. So as much as I hated cleaning toilets and helping my father in the evenings after school and after his first job, clean offices in the evenings, just because you don't like it doesn't mean you don't do it. There's nothing you're above to. I was really good at cleaning toilets and cleaning offices. Just because I didn't like it, didn't mean I wasn't competent in it. So this is the thing that I once made a lot of women who wound up living with me, not that many, I've lived with a half a dozen in my life, thought I was gay for a long time because I was so clean. We joked about this, and my refrigerator is cleaner than most women's, and in that sense, I'm sort of predisposed to cleaning. And you once said to me way long time ago, "Oh, well, it makes sense. You like cleaning your house because you were cleaning up all the paradigms of the earth."
I forgot that.
Yeah, so I think about that every time I wash my hardwood floors.
Well, and I wanted to connect that to the false split between self and other, which we've talked about before.
Sure.
That we have this conditioning that work is for other and not for self, and
Yes.
that we're trading, with a full-time job, half of our working hours to do something that we don't really want to do, so that we can do what we really want to do with the other half of the waking hours.
Yes.
And I did some research on this once. I was teaching a class about this kind of stuff, and did you know? In Latin, the Latin root for work in Spanish is trabajo. In Portuguese, it's trabalho. In Italian, it's travaglio. The Latin root is tripaliare, which in Roman times was like a cross, only with 3 sticks instead of 2, and similar to a crucifix, it was used as a torture device.
Oh
That's
my
the root.
God. Of work?
That's
I
the
did.
root of work in
Wow.
Latin. And in
Wow.
where work comes from in Middle English, I believe, the prior to Germanic in English, it has the same root as reek, Wreak.
Wow.
And so prior to the Protestant Reformation, where
Hmm.
there was a spiritual reason to work hard, work was
Right.
seen as this bad, awful thing that you have to suffer and you want to avoid. That's where slavery came in. Well, instead of doing all this work, let's conquer those different colored people over there and get them to do
Yes.
the work,
Yes,
because work is
exactly.
inherently bad.
Yes. Work inherently bad. That's why it's so important. Only the inauthentic shadow protective version of ourselves would relate to work that way. For our soulful, heartful, authentic being, we only want to make money at what we are destined or feel our skill sets and passion agree with. It's work. You know, you found your passion path when what you do doesn't feel like work.
Mm.
But that's because of this other way that you just so beautifully historicized, is completely only the province of our inauthentic version of selves. And so, since the inauthentic version of ourself is pandemically describes basically 90% of our population on the planet, both innocent and guilty versions of them. It's hopeless. There's no way to change our whole species relationship with money and work without a whole overhaul of the metaphysics governing the worldview of human beings.
Mm.
So beautifully, that was a great spot to put that piece in there, Joseph.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's completely fascinating to me, and like I said, the self versus other thing. If you don't see work, even cleaning toilets, as being somehow for you, then
Right.
it's for other, and then then invites parent projections, and you're not going to want to do that great a job, and you're not going to be competent at it, and you're going to resent it, and then that work is something other than you rather than an expression of you.
Yes.
That's, I think, one of the big problems with the younger generations. It seems they want their passion path at age 19, and they
Yeah.
don't see the need to earn their way toward that, which you and
Right.
I certainly both had to do.
Yes, that's for sure. So let's cap this middle value for value phrase of the definition of money with when we say our authentic, soulful, heartful being, we're talking about being emotively mature, emotively mature. So in that sense, emotively mature people pay money and in return expect competency, caring, and accountability, which I want to say a few things about. Competency, caring, and accountability because they demand all three in themselves. In
Mm.
other words, when you demand, before I can take any money for a reader of a person's incarnational imperatives or what they put in to work on this life, I better be pretty confident in my real competency in being able to do this, or else I couldn't take a penny for it. I have a basic confidence shown over the years that I have a skill set in that dimension, and thankfully my skill sets match almost 100% resonate with my passion path. Now, this is not true for everyone. You might have a passion path that you haven't developed a skill set for, and so, like you just said, with the younger generations, they may have a passion path, but they want it whether or not they have the actual skill set for it, and that's the earning. You've got to have the effort based in skill sets that matches your passion path, and that's not always the case. I ask people over the years, Joseph, you've heard these answers, right? What's your passion? What's your passion in life? Travel.
Oh God.
Travel.
Yeah.
Another one is helping people.
Travel, by the
Um,
way, is the same root as tripaliare, and
oh my God.
it's the same root. And travail, it comes from the French travail. It implies hardship and difficulty. Isn't it
Well,
fascinating?
now there's one I can absolutely agree with.
Right?
I hate to travel.
Travel is torture. Yep.
Oh my God, you too, I think, isn't
Oh
it?
yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
I
I hate
just,
it.
I want to stay home. That's
Hmm.
it. So in that sense, we when we pay money for a good or goods or service, we expect competency, and competency is always a function of caring. If you don't give a shit about the integrity of your product, well, you're not going to be competent in your delivery of your product, whether that's a good or a service, right? So caring and competency are absolutely indivisible. But then there's a third piece, accountability. When you see in government all the time huge wastings of billions of dollars of outlay.
Yeah.
Oh, here's what happened, and now we're going to fix it, without ever holding accountable those who were responsible for that boondoggle to ever face justice over it.
Like
What?
George W. Bush's mistakes were made, which has been
Oh,
called the past excusative tense. I heard
yes,
somebody call it. Isn't that great?
mistakes were made. In other words, we acknowledge, oh, it's all optics. We acknowledge, but we're not going to be accountable for our
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. In fact, admitting the mistakes is accountability. That's the way it's passed off in the modern day.
Yeah.
Accountability means somebody must pay for corruption.
Mm-hmm.
The worst example, worst example, it's worst for me because after the 2008 boondoggle, when it all settled out and Barack was running the show at that time, a lot of the corporations and the people involved with the whole mortgage derivative catastrophe that blew a hole in the entire global economy were rewarded with agency overseeing to
Yeah.
make sure it never happens again.
Right.
I remember saying to Bree, I was in my Barack, my brother, what? After all that we can do it, and
Yeah.
how could he do that?
That's how the
So
inmates design the rehab program.
exactly right. So there's the piece of accountability that's missing in our relationship with fiduciary domains of human experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's always has to be accountability, and if you want to slide by accountability, again, that would never be done by an authentic, emotively mature person. So in that sense, if you really want to make a lot of money, that's really easy. Metaphysically, it's really easy. Just make it the most important thing in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make a lot of money and you are dead set on making it the most important thing in your life, you will find a way. You'll either manipulate your way or skill set your way to wealth. It's not a big secret, everyone. It's just make it the most important thing in your life. But this is the thing here is, are you a money seeker, or are you a meaning seeker in life?
Mm-hmm.
You and I, of course, we want sufficiency of financial projections and reality, but it always took a second show to our meaning, our quest for meaning. So as two souls who have made meaning the center, the most important thing in life, we've then tried to retrofit our relationship with money in it. And by and large, we've both been basically successful. You're far more successful than me in this, because you found a way to teach identity and into the domain of business also, which I never did.
Mm.
And so that's a far more set variable in human intercourse and discourse, business. And so if you found a way to teach identity's principles into business organization and improvement, you have a lot more. You had a lot more of a market in that way.
Yeah.
Mine was pure. Who's curious about destroying everything we've ever been taught about humanness versus God?
Without any potential financial gain from the process. It's a way different value proposition.
Right, and exactly right, and that's why I've mentioned another thing on other podcasts. I either did the stupidest thing you could do as an intelligent person, or the smartest.
Oh, it's a purer form. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just how it had to be for you.
I walked away from a medical career
Hmm.
in the medical arts, which had a guaranteed high level income.
Yeah.
Uh, and then about 8 9 years later, I was offered a recording contract for my songwriting and singing, and I turned that down because I saw that was just a little more acceptable trap to get
Hmm.
out of developing something from the ground up that didn't exist before. So I know this firsthand, and I'm not patting my back here because of that. I've been struggling financially most of my life. I've gotten help from people, beautiful people over the years to tide me over this for these 3 years or that 1 year, and lots of beautiful people who all unsung people in the last 40, 30 years who have contributed to my life by giving me money that I always almost it was so beautifully in a line with I wouldn't take money from anyone that didn't feel like that I could feel believed in what I was doing. So
Hmm.
there was a situation there where I still required that the person had a buy into what I was doing, not just because I was a smart guy or they wanted to give me money in exchange for sex or being part of the inner circle or whatever. So in this sense, integrity and accountability is always are always values associated with our emotively
It,
mature.
it makes me want to share a story. But before I got into working with business leaders, I was a high tech recruiter right before the dot bomb in 2000.
Uh,
And I specialized in finding really hard to find people and what's they call sourcing and recruiting.
mhm.
And it's just like with dating, the good ones are usually taken. So
Yes.
at that time in tech, generally to find those hard to find people, you would have to do what's called poaching, which is moving someone from one company to another company
Sure.
and with very seductive offers. And what was very much rewarded and I was taught to do was some pretty underhanded practices like calling the VP calling an HR person and posing as some executive in the company and getting them to fax you the company directory so that you would have a list of all the people. That's the kind of stuff that I did. They called it rusing. You were basically lying in order
Yes.
to get the material to be able to call people up because you can't just more. It's even harder than ever to find that kind of information. And it made me physically ill after just like a month or two of doing it. It just caused anxiety and I felt just really gross because it didn't fit my values. And I was 23, 24 at the time. I didn't have a real solid set of values, but I
Mhm.
viscerally felt that something was very wrong about it.
Yeah.
And it caused a lot of depression. And fortunately for me, the dot bomb happened, and every recruiter was fired in the Bay Area overnight, basically. And I was out of
Wow.
work for 3 months. But I'm just secretly relieved that I didn't have to do it anymore.
Reminds me of something I haven't thought of in years in one way. I actually sold health insurance at one point
Hmm.
also. And I worked for a health insurance company and as an agent. And I actually landed a health insurance account with a school district, a fairly large school
Big
district.
client, yeah.
Big client. A lot of the other bigger health insurance companies were angling. I had to compete with the agents of these other bigger Aetna and a few others. And so when I made my presentation to the board, the school board, and I was grilled completely, I had to really know my stuff. And I promised them that I would be there. I would service the account, not just sell the account. And for
Mm.
that, I had to get the okay and the buy-in because in the health insurance company I worked for, there were the ones who sold the account, and then there were the ones at home office who serviced the account.
Yeah.
So I insisted that to my boss that I would also service the account, work directly with the home office in servicing the account, and that's what got me. That's what got me the sell.
Hmm.
Yeah, but in that, one of the most important elements of that package was pregnancy coverage, paying for time off for
Hmm.
pregnancy, which was the big folks were offering, but had really higher premiums
Uh-huh.
for that particular element. when I got my boss to, it was still a smaller health insurance company, and the boss okayed all the evaluations, not lesser minions in the company. He quoted me a price that was frankly surprising to me. I mean, I know about actuarial assessments of risk,
Mm-hmm.
and how many people in a given population are going to have babies,
Yeah.
how many are going to have problems with the blah 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 blah. At any rate, he quoted me a price that undercut the biggies, the bigger companies, by like 15%, which was pretty significant. That's, I would like to say, my integrity and my warmth and the promise to service the account got me the account, and it did. I would say 50%. The other 50% is because I lowballed, my boss lowballed the
Mm-hmm.
quote. Well, fast forward, almost done here. 6, 8 months into I got the account. The company got huge amounts of good press out of it. Took them to the next level. It was just a small company at that time, uh, and uh, and pretty soon the school board was coming to me complaining that they were getting rejections on a lot of
Oh
pregnancy
no.
claims. And when I went to my boss, he did a very similar thing as what you just said about rusing. He said, "Well, tell him we're working on it."
Oh God.
And I said, I live in the same town as these people. I can't, I have to represent them. Why I need to go back to them in the next school board meeting, why they're not getting their claims, pregnancy paid. Well, we're finding our statisticians saying that we can't really cover all of them. So, in tried and true, and this is a truth from the inside, a lot of people know this from the outside, insurance companies are in the business of obfuscation and daring people of limited means to sue them
Yeah.
for reneging on actual policy dynamics that they agreed on ahead. They just, the disintegrity in the health insurance domain in this country is beyond, the corruption is beyond
Yeah.
description. Well, I wouldn't do it. He finally confided in me that it was to get the sale and that they're doing the best they can, but the money they were making on the money of their income still wasn't paying off to be able to pay all the logistics of the policy. So just put it off. Tell them we'll pay it. Don't worry. Or
Whoa.
say they misunderstood.
Oh
And give
God.
me a choice. You can't misunderstand what's in black and white, right?
Yeah.
Well, I said I won't do it, and of course, he fired me.
Oh.
Uh, and so this is another story of what happens when you get into the business where money is the most important thing in your life.
Yeah.
Corporation money is the blood supply. Business is the blood supply. But that alone is one step removed, as you said, in another dimension here, from our personal relationship with money. When you collectivize it into a business, the lowest common denominator wins in collectivism, always, always. And
Oh.
so you're going to have a far more corruption in business, space for corruption, than you would have in some ways with an individual. But I think that was in my day. In the modern day, it's about equal. All
Yeah.
you have to do is look at the 45th president and all the troubles he's in right now.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, in that sense, that we've just completed the value for value version of it. In that sense, when we're talking about the last phrase of a mutual good service and integrity with others, comes in a very important counterintuitive element, and that is we've all been taught that because of our wound-based, will-based relationship with money, we have been taught to learn how to willfully manifest it.
Mm.
Willfully manifest it. That's a yogic dynamic that most people still, the 99% of the people on the planet, don't get, that as of 2012, the yang dimension of God has taken a backseat to the yin dimension of God, which happened in 2012. And will manifestation of money is no longer supported by divinity. Now it's not manifesting money by will, but drawing money to us based on inner right relationship to money. That's the new modicum of humanity's support from divinity, to draw money in concert with your healthy inner state relationship to money, not manifesting it by will. Manifesting it by will create all those things that you just said, strategies and tactics to get money. And there's no strategy or tactic in an emotionally mature person's relationship to money. There just isn't. And in that way, you can sit back, gulp hard, and trust that money will come to you as needed. Now, when you're when you're planting seeds for a paradigm that has never a new paradigm of the human condition, there's not a lot of elements except to work side jobs to pay the rent and eat and
Mm.
get some donations from people once in a while. So in that sense, my trust level had to be, as high as the sky to be able to get along all these years, and not manifesting by will, but by trust. And every single month, sometimes it came down to the last day. I've never been homeless. I've never gone hungry. I've never owned a home. Bree and I are both lifelong renters. I've never had a lot of money. I had a 10-year period that you know of where I made the most I ever made in my life was about 120,000 a year, take home about 72,000. That was living on $72,000 a month with a spouse and a stepchild. That is not a lot of money take home,
Yeah.
even at that time, which was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's the most money I ever made. And I can say that plainly and clearly and honestly on this podcast. So I've never been wealthy. But for a period of time, my waiting and trusting paid off. And all of a sudden, people got interested, not in this country mostly, but in
Mm-hmm.
Europe, got interested. So I drew it by that trust, even though that all had to collapse because of another element of my shadow got involved with it afterward or and during it. So in that sense, uh, our new fiat for our relationship to money is not will based, but it's trust based. Draw it to us,
I've got
assuming
a
that.
I've got a
Assume,
negative. Sorry, go ahead. To draw to us, yeah, I've got an opposite story than what you just shared. It's about 4 or 5 years ago. I had a client who his leads dried up. He was a professional services guy, and he was working on marketing. And somehow, like I was struck with fear because his business for decades had been all referral, and it just disappeared on him.
uh,
And I was helping him with some of that, and I was struck with fear somewhere in me that, well, that could happen to me too, because my business has been 99.9% referral. So
mhm.
for a couple of years I tried marketing. I hired someone, put $10,000-$15,000 over a couple of years into marketing. Not a single one of those dollars paid off. It was a complete and total failure.
Oh my God.
And it was
Wow.
really painful because it just showed me I was reaching from this insecure lack place of I want to be able
Mhm.
to control my lead flow
Yes.
in case it ever dries up. And life
Right.
basically answered like, no, you don't get to do that. Not even a little bit.
Well, and again, that says something about you that didn't stick or gravitate to you. That says somewhere in you you're too purely a meaning-based guy than a money-based guy for it to stick.
But it was so frustrating. Like it's still, I mean, I've
Sure.
made peace with it. And every once in a while I feel this itch of like, oh yeah, I should really do something to, and I'm like, no, I tried that. I dead ended that. It,
Yeah.
it didn't
Oh my
work.
God.
Got to keep trusting.
Oh. Well, when you have a will-based relationship with accumulating money, you're going to always be overcoming obstacles, whatever they are. In this case, an obstacle by trying to maximize, a different marketing a picture of things.
Hmm.
But here's the difference: hedonists don't overcome obstacles; they undergo possibles. We're constantly undergoing the possibilities of life. And if we're not drawing sufficient money for our basic survival and some minimum or medium thrival, that's telling us something. Either something is missing in here to not draw it, or what your good or service is not really tuned to the need basis of the world society.
Yeah.
So if your passion path is making flutes made out of bamboo, because the bamboo will give a tinder or an
Timbre?
element tamper of color to the sound that is more spiritual than a one made of metal. Well, okay, if that's your passion path, that's your product. It's not really suited to the world's worldview of marketing in the planet. And mine was I can say that with a smile because my version was last in line. Uh, where do you go to market an
Yeah.
entire new paradigm of the human condition that contradicted 500 years of psychological, 1,000 years of philosophical, and 5,000 years of religious teaching? Where do you go with that? You certainly don't go to the Pope and say, "Hey, bud, can you siphon some of that money from the Vatican there so
Yeah.
I can unseat, collapse
Yeah.
your paradigm?"
Would you like an experience that everything you've always learned is completely wrong? Like how much would you be willing to pay?
Oh God, exactly right. Um, and that reminds me, at this moment in time, before we complete, in terms
Mm.
of integrity and solidness in our relationship to money, I've got to talk about Bernie Madoff's magic
Ah,
Technicolor 10% return Dreamcoat machine, um, where the from the lots of movie stars and celebrities, those bastions of deep into philosophical insight, and a lot of mom and pop folks also invested in Bernie's Ponzi scheme without ever asking how he got his 10% return
yeah.
every year, every year, every year. And of course, he was just gaslighting the entire time. And even he was bought in by the regulatory SEC, the agency that was supposed to oversee him. He gaslit them too with his charm. And so that's fine. People are responsible for investing in someone who's a faker. Uh, um, but what really bothered me, that didn't bother me so much. I've seen this kind of shysterism over a couple thousand years of incarnating
Hmm.
here, every different forms. What bothered me was that it was so outrageous that the government stepped in and said, you can sue. There was a legal redress allowed. It was a loophole in some other law that allowed you to sue Bernie for money you willingly gave him that was risky. Now, and so everybody got on the bandwagon and suing Bernie, trying to get their money back. But suing Bernie for the money you chose to give him, I have a good metaphor for it. It's like um, uh, it's like suing a thief, a robber, a burglar for robbing you when you invited them in to take your jewelry, so you can get an insurance check for your loss. That
Right. It's privatizing profit, socializing risk.
Exactly right. And
Mm.
so that was what appalled me far more than the silliness of people investing in this 10% Dreamcoat machine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's
tech,
victimhood. It's a form of
yeah,
victimhood.
total victimhood.
Mm.
So there's a case where Bernie, well, he was if you knew the guy, you'd know he was really an affable guy, very friendly, warm. He didn't have the eyes of the Zuck or Jeff or Bill. He was really affable and cared about people and warm. And he knew himself what he was doing, but he couldn't stop himself from wanting to help people in the end. And too bad you don't get to do that, Bern.
Yeah.
And he passed away in jail, I think.
I think
I
so.
think,
Yeah.
yeah. So when we talk about our relationship with to money, what's in the ideal sense, but is actually by default with money, we're talking about a worldwide disease,
Mm.
and that is so ensconced by default in almost every moment aspect of human life that it's impossible to be free of it. All you can do is trust divine being, match your skill set and your passion path, only take money relative to what your skill set competently gives in your caring for people. Find a niche in there, in my niche, which is, we've talked about this a couple of times, and you said, well, there's a way to do this that's cleaner, and you're right. But I'm sort of old and set in my ways. I make sure I bank in a bank that doesn't give any interest on my savings
Mm,
or my checking accounts, no
mm-hmm,
interest. I don't want backwash from that corrupt system coming
mm-hmm.
into my personal world of finance. Now that's crazy, stupid in some ways, but it's my one form of activism that I
Yeah.
can do, and that's okay with me. How much interest does can you really get on savings these days anyway? But back in the day when you could get 6 or 7%,
Yeah.
I was foregoing quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's still the case. So that way, that's how it works it for my life.
Is it another? I just recently watched on the subject a documentary about Woodstock '99,
Oh yes, I saw. I
and
saw. Yeah,
yeah, and it was a fascinating juxtaposition between the Woodstock of '69 and Woodstock '99, which was very profit driven, and they outsourced the sanitation, subcontracted out the sanitation thing and the food thing. And so they had people who were doing the minimum of emptying porta
yes,
potties or not emptying them, as the case was. They were doing the minimum around that, which created huge sanitation problems and let people price gouge bottles of water and food and stuff. And
right.
that upset the crowds. And of course, it was not in the spirit of Woodstock, which was sort of the
Yes,
brand for it, resulting
right.
in pissing people off, resulting in riots, and even there were rapes and people died. It was a horrible, horrible thing. And it's such a good example of what the willful manifestation energy does in a sort of micro culture like that one music festival. But that's going on all over the world all the
All over the
time.
world, right? All based on the axiom: the most money for the least effort.
Yeah,
Right.
it has a cost.
It does. I once reminds me here, Joseph, about a quick aside. Somebody was once asked me about that no interest thing in my own small little silly activism way, and I said, well, what if everyone did that? What if everyone did that? Wouldn't that sort of challenge the system? We wouldn't topple it, but wouldn't it challenge it? And they weren't having any of it. So I came up with a metaphor for this person. I said, imagine being 2 a.m., 2 in the morning, a stadium, an athletic stadium
Mm.
that has a top to it that you can close, and all the lights are off. All the lights are off, and you're up in the highest tier bleacher section, and someone lights a candle on the 50-yard line, let's say, of that stadium, in the despite millions and millions of gallons of darkness,
Mm.
you will be able to see that candle half a mile away on the 50-yard line. And that's a metaphor for all of us to take that our own small contributions to anything, which seems so drowned out by the white noise of the world
Yeah.
and the contrary dynamics of corruption and misinformation. Um, Try to remember that if you get discouraged by all that, try to remember that metaphor, because no amount of darkness will stop real light. And that real light comes from a position we take in our heart and soul about how we relate to the vagaries of this world. Unlike the spiritual paradigms of the past, Joseph, you know this better than anyone, that wanted to break away from mundane human culture and all the Maya in the culture and all the greed and the cruelty and the inhumanity. So they sanitize by having little islands called ashrams and retreat centers, separating ashrams in the old days, completely separated from human life. Had people shave their heads and wear the same clothes to depersonalize them, and thereby try to be ensconced in a away from all the Maya and corruption of humanity, and to get some spiritual work done.
Mm.
Well, identity doesn't fall for that stuff at all. It doesn't expect a utopian world. It doesn't work toward a utopian world. It says, let's learn how to meditate in a New York subway at rush hour. Let's learn to be whole when our families tell us we're crazy and our partners divorce us because of our soulful picture of things, be willing to not try to change the world, but change yourself. And that's, of course, a mantra that I certainly didn't invent,
Yeah.
but it has meaning in so many other dimensions as the original context for that was said. And that is, don't expect a spiritually sanitized world. Don't expect an Eden. When we say identity, we're talking about an inner state, not creating an outer state of a world one world government where everything is transhumanized and we were herded like cattle at the push of a button, which World Economic Forum guy is all for transhumanism. It's none of that. In other words, take the world as it is and learn that when we change our insides, the outside of our world changes too, all within the parameters of how pure we're willing to embody, as we started this conversation, our truthful, soulful, authentic being.
Whew. Amen.
Amen. And a little postscript to that. Take a look at your relationship to beauty, to bounty, and to meaning, because you can have a wound-based relationship with meaning also. Just ask a QAnoner, and you will have your answer there. So, in that sense, to be a holy human is to be holy with a W, human. A holy human is wholly human, and in that, an identity, and in that sense, it's all about our internal Edenic state, not any sanitized or purified world that's going to make it easier for us to turn our insides into a clean, clear, integrous place. It's the other way around. All of human life works from the inside out, not the outside in. We have a world going absolutely crazy and self-destructing as we speak in slow motion, because we've all been conditioned to create a world from the outside in. And nowhere does that show itself so plainly than in the world of money.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a lot to digest. I don't know if we're going to spend more time on money, maybe take it down a level into some practicalities. I'm not sure. Or go into the economy. We'll find out.
Oh, yeah. If you want to structure some questions around that, I gave sort of the overview today.
Oh.
You're more of a acute financial observer of the human condition than I am. So if you want to bring 5 or 6 questions, I'm sure we can fill an hour and a half with 5 or 6.
I'll think about that. Well, in the meantime, I hope this was rich and valuable for you, and maybe even worth some money. If it was to you, you can PayPal me at. No, just kidding. If you want, if this podcast is valuable to you, here's Identity might ask the question: why wouldn't you give us money? No, that's not really the spirit of this, but certainly we would take it.
Certainly, we would.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. Thank you, Stace. This was really fascinating for me. And tune in next time to see what we're talking about next.
All right. Thanks, Joseph, as always.
Yeah. Okay. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Heart of Soul podcast. To learn more about Stace Barron and Identity, please visit identity.org. To learn more about Joseph Shapiro, visit clearandopen.com. Until next time, we wish you well on your journey.